and 314 for a shooting at Century Theaters. They're saying somebody's shooting in the auditorium.
Roger, keep your fires west of the smoke. You're cleared hot. An officer hit. Send me the world.
Don't go over that fence. Don't go over that fence. Grab the shotgun again.
Welcome to Tactical Tangents.
Welcome back to Tactical Tangents. This is Mike. This episode is brought to you by Drip Drop. Drip Drop Oral Rehydration Solution is an electrolyte powder that you mix with water. It was formulated by a doctor for quick absorption. I work in the desert, and it only takes a few hours in the heat, wearing body armor, carrying around a bunch of gear before I start feeling like crap and fall behind the curve in dehydration. Drip Drop keeps you in the fight so you can finish the mission and rehab for the next one. Go get you some at dripdrop.com or on Amazon, or ask your supply guy to find it for you.
This episode is also brought to you by Manus X. You're not going to get better at shooting on your own. You need practice, you need data, you need coaching. You need to make the most of your ammo with good live and dry fire training. Manus is a family of training devices that helps you track your movements while you train. It times and tracks everything you do in a shooting drill and coaches you as you go. You can find them on manusx.com.
So a little while back, we did an episode on leadership, and we called it Leadership Volume 1, which would suggest that there would someday be a Leadership Volume 2.
Someday, we'll get there.
And to be quite honest with you, I don't even know what we talked about in that episode, so that's okay. It was probably an overview. It was probably a, kind of just scratching the surface of it. And what I want to talk about today is both dealing with and also being the newer junior mid-level guy. And what I mean,
one of the Bobs? Do you mean becoming one of the Bobs? That's what we call it in the military. Oh, you're a major now? Oh, you must be one of the Bobs. Oh, you're a staff sergeant now? Oh, you must be one of the Bobs, right?
Is it like an acronym or?
No, it's from, what is it, Office Space? Oh, the Bobs are here. Oh, they're going to fix everything.
Interesting.
The middle managers?
I've watched some Office Space, but I don't remember that part. Yeah, we could go with that. But yeah, so what I'm talking about, at least in my line of work, is the guys that have, 2, 3, 5 years on, and they're reaching this point where they're pretty comfortable in where they're at. They have their bearings, and they have just enough experience to kind of get a little salty, right? They're starting to get a little bit of an attitude. They're starting to feel a little untouchable, maybe a little arrogant, a little bit of ego. And I'm not saying that to bash everyone with that amount of time on, but usually when you're new, you're a little more careful, right? And when you get settled in is when you start to kind of let your true feelings come out a little bit. And those are the people that I want to talk to, specifically if you are in that demographic, if you will, in your line of work or whatever, but also from a leadership standpoint, kind of some ideas for dealing with that person. And if you have been that person, you know what worked or didn't work for you. So let's try to capture some of that.
Yeah, and from a mentoring perspective, we don't always do a great job helping people get to that level of leadership and management, right? Like, we spend a lot of time and effort in police academy or boot camp or basic training, whatever, creating the beginning assertive followers. And we put a lot of effort into the big bosses. But I think the very junior level stuff, and at least in the Air Force, we have like the Airman Leadership School. We have SOS for the captains and stuff. But my experience with a lot of that education is it's not great at really helping you with the day-to-day, how to interact with the dudes, especially if you grew up with the dudes and now you're in charge of some of those same dudes you grew up with. That can be a little bit of a challenge sometimes. I'm not calling you sir, even if there's a fire.
Yeah. And part of the kicker in this, because what happens in that 2 to 5 year, and I'm sure it's different in the military, Jim. I don't know if that's a similar milestone time-wise or tenure-wise, but
it is. And then we complicate it a little bit with the different rank structures, right? We have the enlisted rank structure, the officer rank structure, the warrant rank structure.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it depends on what little microcosm of the military you're in. But I think you see this even if you work at McDonald's. Sure. If you've been there for a couple of years, you are going to have some authority over others, but you're not going to be able to run the place.
Right. And so another way to look at this would be when you wake up one day and you realize you're not the new guy anymore.
And it comes fast. Let me tell you, age comes at you quickly.
And it's not just, so there's that threshold where you become not the new guy anymore, and you realize like, yeah, you know what? I'm not a rookie. I'm not new at this. I've kind of been around for a minute. I've been around the block a time or two. But then there also comes a later phase where you realize, like, you start to look around and you're like, I'm the oldest guy in the room, or one of them.
I'm the adult.
You know?
Damn.
Yeah.
Oh, we're all hosed.
And there's some self-awareness that should come with being with that realization. And part of that is when you realize that you've got the shitty attitude. If you find yourself complaining all the time or commiserating with people all the time, with all the old timers, a common thing is the old salty guys will be complaining in the room. And if you find yourself joining in, and sometimes it's a humorous thing, sometimes we're just off-gassing and venting, but when you really start to have a shitty attitude about the way things are, that's where you need to start paying attention. And it's easy to go down that spiral, right? That's part of the problem.
And it's natural a little bit, right? You've been around long enough to start seeing the problems. And that's kind of a good thing. You need to see the problems. The leaders that don't see the problems, that don't believe there are any problems, those are terrifying. I don't like those leaders. I want leaders who have their eyes open about, hey, the copier machine hasn't worked in 5 years. Maybe somebody should get that fixed someday.
Right.
Well,
and part of the bitching and moaning and commiserating and complaining and all of that could be things like that. But you have to also balance that with a lack of understanding or empathy for what upper level management is dealing with, because sometimes that, they might be dealing with trying to get you a pay raise or something, or staffing increasing or whatever, that they don't really keep tabs on the copier. And what I have found a lot of times is sometimes those messages don't make it to the right people. And this is where a guy at year tenure can take a little bit of initiative and say, who do I got to talk to make this happen? And you send a couple emails, make a couple phone calls. Next thing you know, you got the copier replaced.
Yep.
Because
if you're waiting for someone to fix your problems, you're going to be waiting for a long dang time.
Right. And so like, this is where you have to take some ownership in that. And it's funny, if you're nice to the right people, like if you're nice to the building manager or the first shirt or the admin supervisor or the logistics or supply guy or whoever it is, and you just interact with them in a pleasant way and you start asking questions, I'm like, oh, you guys need a copier? Oh yeah. Just shoot me an email and remind me, like I'll have it down there next Tuesday. Boom, done. Didn't have to bug any commander, it's just got taken care of, right? And what comes with that is when you start figuring out who those people are to talk to, and you start to realize that you're the guy that has just that little bit of influence, is you need to realize that there are younger and newer people who are also looking up to you. And I think when it becomes cool to bitch and complain with the old guys, and you think like, yeah, well, just they don't care about you. You're just a number, this and that, and you lose sight of the fact that, you know what? These younger guys are actually paying a lot of attention to and they're going to turn into the same guy with the shitty attitude in a couple years too, unless you start to have some positive influence on them. And so maybe you should step up and be a leader and mentor them and coach them and see the good in things, right? Doesn't mean that you don't address the problems, but that's kind of where we're headed with this episode, is that turning point in your own mind where you realize I've had a shitty attitude and I should be better about that because there's people out there that I can reach out and touch in some way.
Yeah. And, shitty attitude means different things to different people too. There's the guys who are just pissy all the time and just complain all the time. There are also the guys who've just given up and they're just kind of resigned. And they're not fixing anything. They're not doing anything. They're just collecting a paycheck. In the military, we call that road, retired on active duty.
Oh yeah. We have similar.
And, they're just counting down the days. That's great. But that's a liability in a tactical community, right? Like we need you on our side. We need you to be part of the solution, not part of the problem when the chips are down. Another thing that will drive this is right about middle of your career is when you start to figure out where you were on the pyramid. And maybe you didn't get as high on the pyramid as you thought you were going to get. Maybe you got passed over for promotion, or other people in your cohort got promoted ahead of you. And it's very easy to get very cynical about that. Ask me how I know. But
I wasn't going to say anything, Jim, but
yeah, but you get to make a choice. When that started to happen to me, I had choices to make. I could have left the military and maybe I would make a lot more money. You know, I could go fly for the airlines, or I could run a podcast or whatever. But I had to look myself in the mirror and say, hey, I'm in the military for a reason. I want to go find the forces of evil and darkness and kill them deader than hell. And I want to lead people in the process, and I want to fly airplanes in the process. And that really only puts me in the military, basically. So I said, screw it. I'm going to stick around. I'm going to try and help however I can. I'm going to try and teach the new guys however I can and make the best of the time I got. And it's still cooler than a real job. So I try to go into every day like that, even if my little career progression path didn't go the way I expected.
And that's a key. Those are key points, because if you let those bad attitudes kind of simmer, they end up becoming pretty contagious and even cancerous, you could say. And
it's hard on you too. Not only does it screw up the organization, like it screws up you. So you got to have some self-awareness about that and some emotional awareness about that.
Yeah. And one of the problems that can come with it is with that bad attitude and kind of that cynicism that Jim is talking about, it could start to influence your behavior and some judgment decision-making stuff in a way that will kind of make it an ends justifies the means thing, right? Well, maybe if they gave us staffing that I have to do X, Y, and Z. I wouldn't have to lie to my boss about why I have to not be at work or this and that and the other thing. And that's problematic because you're contributing to the problems that now your management and your higher level leadership has to deal with, right? Because you're not being part of the solution. So,
and you can see quickly that can spiral way out of control, right? Your organization might be all screwed up, but I'll tell you what, your organization will catch time and accounting fraud. I guarantee it.
Yeah. Funny how when things have dollar signs in front of it, there's everyone cares a lot more, right? So there's a concept in leadership called the situational leadership model, and we're not going to deep dive it, but you should Google it and check it out. And if you look at the way that it's written, it kind of has a graph, sort of a graphic, a chart that goes with it. And in a nutshell, it talks about approaching people, leadership situations based on two basic factors: their level of competence for any given task and their level of motivation for any given task. And based on an assessment of those two metrics, you can handle someone one of about four ways. And obviously there's some gray in there, but in a nutshell, that's what it means. For a new guy who is very, very motivated but does not have much competence, you can be very directive with that person and just tell them what to do. So as that junior guy starts to get a little bit more competence, inevitably, like someone in this demographic we're talking about, this 2 to 5 year range, their motivation will start to come down a little bit. And an approach to use with them is to be a little bit more democratic. Let them participate in the process. Let them have a say, right? And as their competence starts to increase, they gain a little bit of independence. They're a little bit more capable. Their motivation is kind of still a little bit in that slump. That's where you have to dangle a carrot and kind of persuade or sell things to them and sort of like encourage them in a way that makes shows that there's some incentive, right? And arguably you could say that a lot of what we're doing in this podcast is that persuading and salesmanship bit, where I'm trying to show somebody that, hey, you can actually make a really big difference if you just have a better attitude about it and start to lift other people up around you and be part of the solution, right? And then obviously once you get to that high level of motivation and you start to build competence, maybe even you could say expertise, is when you could just delegate tasks to someone. Say, hey, can you handle writing a class on X, Y, and Z, or doing some training for this and that? Or can you take this new guy and show him the ropes? And you're good with that. Like, you don't need to be monitored super closely, right? So those are the four basic kind of approaches.
And there's, of course, nuance off of that, right? This is a two-dimensional model. It's just a snapshot of things to look for. But what it's really trying to convey is you need to know yourself and where you fall on that little grid. You need to read the people you're around and where they fall on that little grid. And that's the beginning of figuring out kind of how to categorize and work through issues in trying to motivate people.
Yeah.
Also consider over a couple of years on the job, people are demographically shifting, right? You're not just dealing with a bright-eyed, bushy-tailed 21-year-old just out of the academy or just out of the Air Force Academy or just out of boot camp. You are dealing with someone who now has a wife or a husband and kids, and they're not sleeping at night. And their school, just the elementary school, just shut down because of COVID. And they're thinking about 10,000 things that aren't you and your problems and your organization's problems. And sometimes you got to kind of reel them in and say, hey, we're at work right now. I've got you for the next 8 hours. I need your brain here. Right.
Yeah. And the idea is by taking these kind of different approaches, and again, it's situation dependent. It's based on the specific task and the specific circumstance. There was a time where, I became like the PowerPoint guy for a group that I was in, and they would be like, "Hey, you're good at computer stuff. Can you write a PowerPoint?" And I'm like, I'm not the only guy on the planet that can. I'd be happy to help coach someone on how to write a PowerPoint. Other people should probably learn how to do that too, not just this guy, right? Like,
thanks.
So you read it based on individual tasks, and like Jim said, it's just a concept. It's supposed to illustrate that point of tailoring your approach to the situation.
Yeah, and like know your troops. Like it's wonderful. Okay, great. Know my troops. This is the kind of thing we want you to know about your troops, right?
Yeah. So that being said, the water cooler talk, if you will, that we started to talk about earlier, where guys will be in a room and everyone will start bitching and complaining, and they're just kind of in that slump, that low motivation state with their competence. They generally know what they're talking about. There is some grounding in reality about the things that they're complaining of. This is where a guy or gal like you can show a little bit of empathy for the big picture and for the upper management, upper leadership, and start to convince them, persuade them, influence them into why we have to look at something a different way. And I had a good recent example of this, and I can't remember the exact topic, but I was standing around a group of cops that were all senior to me. Some of them were detectives, some were sergeants, and it had something to do with management leadership stuff, right? And the cycle of bitching back and forth was just getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And I spoke up and I was like, hey, that's one thing, that other supervisors or commanders or whatever look at this certain way, but I try to just view it through the lens of what my own reputation and what I have to say about it. And this has been the way I handle that. And they were like, huh, never really thought about it that way. I guess you're right. Like, it's not really all about them. It's also about me. Weird. Funny how that works. And that doesn't just make you a company man, like the yes man, who's just there to sell the praises of your bosses. It's to make it about taking ownership in your own reputation and your own reality, right?
And there's a lot to consider there. One is just basic framing, how you think about things. One of my rules in life, in my family, in my organization is you never get to point out a problem without also pointing out a solution. You just frame it in not just this sucks, but this sucks and what can I do about it? That's a big deal. A couple other things. At some point and quickly, the organization, whatever you belong to, the agency, the police department, the Marine Corps, whatever, or that particular little subunit, that organization becomes your organization. In fact, the sooner you do that, the better. So when you see things are jacked up, don't just wait around for someone else to fix them. It was a big day for me in the military. I was in a flying squadron, and I noticed in the mission planning room that the trash cans were overfilling. And I'm like, damn, someone needs to take out the trash all up in here. And I looked around, I'm like,
if only you knew a guy.
Well, shit. It's my problem. This is my squadron. And that was kind of a turn for me, going from an entitled little lieutenant into a guy who understood that that's my damn building. And I try to inculcate that into the people around me.
I had similar experiences that related to some training that was happening a while back where the messaging in some of our use of force stuff was getting pushed out in a way that it was like the telephone game, right? There was curriculum that the academy put together, and they were pushing it out through the chain of command of each division within the agency. And the problem with it is that meant every lieutenant, every individual commander for each set of troops all had their own sort of spin on it, right? And it not only did it create a consistency problem, it also affected, it sort of shifted the culture of how we handled use of force decisions. Because it was not coming from the training perspective, it was coming from the administrative perspective, which is different. They should be in sync in a perfect world, but just because commanders are administrators and are supposed to be, supportive and all of that, they also have a different job than the training staff. Like they're going to have different perspectives, and the training staff are the subject matter experts in teaching people how to make good decisions, right? The administrators are the oversight and the facilitators of all the other stuff, but those are different jobs. And this created a problem that I was seeing across the agency that I finally went down to the training staff and tried to sound the alarm. And at first they were like, well, that's not really what the lesson says. That shouldn't be happening. And I'm like, well, it is happening. So we need to fix that. And they're like, well, what do you propose? And I was like, well, I'm glad you asked. And so we went down this path. Now, the caution there is, you should be invested. You should be part of the solution. But guess what? That means now you have to apply yourself and you have to do the work.
Dang.
So you're writing yourself, or the agency a check in many cases. But guess what? That's leadership.
Yep. Mike earlier mentioned big picture, and it's important to understand what big picture really means. And I feel sometimes, and he kind of addressed this as far as, you're not just there to apologize for the management, not just there to oh, well, we should just trust the bosses because they're the bosses. That's bullshit. Nobody likes that. That said, you do really need to understand the wider picture, right? A lot of my education is in the what's called operational art. And that is translating some policymaker or some general's vision into some kind of tactical reality. And that involves either writing or interpreting rules for the guys on the bottom of the totem pole. Well, if you're going to do that, you gosh darn better understand what the bosses are trying to do. So you need that understanding and communication. If you're not getting it from the bosses, you need to go get it from the bosses, right?
And the other part of that picture, including what you see with your bosses, but also with yourself, is understanding where your sphere of influence lies. And in a minute, we're going to get to leading up, because I mentioned earlier that, your bosses might not know the copy machine in the basement's broken, right? Just because we've all been bitching about it. Has anyone actually gone and told them that it's broken? That's a real problem that comes up.
You didn't do a work order, did you?
Yeah. So, and it's silly that there has to be a process, a form to fill out to get something fixed. But if that process is in place and no one's done it, then you can't really blame them for, do you think that your boss, your commander, the chief of police goes around to all the stations to do a function check on the copy machine? I mean,
I actually think this is a huge point, Mike. This is a huge point. And this is it's a maturity thing. You're going to hear that term a lot. And maturity sucks. It sucks having to do adulting things. Half of my job is overwhelming what I call the tyranny of process. Every little support organization on earth has a process. Fill out this form. Go on this web portal that you need 15 different logins for to get anything goddamn fixed, right? Drives me nuts. On the other hand, being the crybaby who's like, how come nothing ever gets fixed? That gets you nothing. You know what gets you something? Learn their process.
And exploit
Follow
it.
their process. Exploit their process. Destroy their process if you need to. But if you're going to do that, you have to understand their process first. And sometimes that means walking over to the guy who handles that sort of thing and be like, teach me everything there is to know about your process. And maybe they need some candid feedback. Maybe their boss needs some candid feedback. You got to be careful about that. Ticking off the IT guy is probably not smart.
Right. And and I mentioned that earlier,
emotional maturity thing, right?
Right. And I mentioned that earlier, that having just being nice to people and making friends and building kind of that network can go a long way. And sure, there comes a point where if you need to, I have to fill out a form to get that fixed. Okay, well, here's a stack of forms. Like, let me know what kind of progress we're making on those, right?
Yep. And then you follow up on it. And
right.
then you follow up on it. And then you follow up on it.
And so that's one way to attack this sort of thing if you have to. But on the flip side, just having a conversation, I can't tell you how many times I've just gone down and said, hey, quick question. I know I probably got to do the form and like drop my car off to get my police car fixed and all that. But I'm just wondering if you could take a look at this real quick and give me an idea. Like, is this going to be like it'll be down for a day kind of thing, or do you need to keep this for a couple weeks? And they'll be like, a lot of times, like, let's take a look at it real quick. And they do it right there on the spot, and I leave with a fixed car. Didn't have to take all my crap out of my car. Didn't have to switch out. It's a huge pain. And just being nice to people can go a long way. But the idea in this,
let me jump on that. I'm sorry. Couple things. First off, learn their names. Learn what they're about. Know your troops. This is that leadership shit they teach you in school, right? What brand of smokes do they smoke? What brand of whiskey do they drink? Like, knowing that, and this is the grease that gets the gears going, right? Is understanding who you're dealing with and what they're all about, understanding your operational environment, understanding who you need to talk to over in that office. And they may not be your troops, but you still have to influence them. And it sucks that maybe you have to do that, but that's the adulting stuff, right?
Yeah. And is this leadership in the sense that we're talking? Are you mentoring and coaching the new guy? Well, no, not necessarily. But when I talk about your sphere of influence and seeing that big picture and having the people that you can go to, one is you become the resource guy, right? You're resourceful, and people come to you because you have solutions to things. And that goes a long way, because every time you have a car problem and it gets fixed right away, then the new guy is like, hey, what do I do if my car does X, Y, and Z? And rather than bitching and complaining about it, you're like, dude, all you got to do is go down to the shops, ask for George, and he'll hook you up. Tell him I sent you. Yep. And here's the thing about that. What you have to understand about sphere of influence is now, instead of having a shitty attitude about his car not getting fixed, you gave him a path where his car got fixed and now he's happy again. Right?
You mean he doesn't have learned helplessness?
Right.
That's a giant deal in leadership, right? That's huge.
But by having that positive connection somewhere else, the people that you are actually going to lead and mentor and coach stay happy, right? And have good attitudes and become more productive and take some of the workload from you and all of that, right? So understand what that sphere of influence is. And that includes your bosses. Just the other day, in fact, yesterday, I went on a call with a brand new patrol supervisor who was a guy that I trained back in the day as a new cop. And I was like, this is so weird. Like, I trained you and now you're in charge of me. Like, fuck off.
The student has become the master.
But I mean, do you think that he would do I have credibility with him? Like, if there's a problem, like, can I go and talk to him about that problem? Your sphere of influence goes both directions, right? And in the case of like the supply guy or the auto mechanic guy or whatever, it also goes lateral, left and right. So really, really consider that.
I like the phrase sphere of influence. And one of the things that it says to me is understanding what you actually can affect, right? That prayer about, accepting the things you can't change and changing the stuff that you can't accept. Well, this is where it plays. You have to be able to read the room and pick your battles a little bit. And I can't change the institution that is the Department of Defense. Like, it's a giant institution. I may not be able to change how we fight wars. What I can change is whether the copier downstairs works. And being realistic about that. This is the thing that I can affect, right? And I can bang my head against the wall about, I don't like how we do performance evaluations in the Air Force. If I don't have a good, solid solution, it doesn't do any good to bang my head against the wall. And maybe there is something I can do on that scale. But if you're going to want to change at the institutional level, you got to write it down. The difference between science and screwing around is writing it down. If you've got a good idea, write it down, staff it around, circulate it, socialize it, get it moving, get some inertia behind it, get buy-in from the next level of leadership. And maybe you can, but that's a lot of work. And you got to be realistic about that.
This is Mike, and I just want to jump in real quick to announce our new partnership with Brink Drones. Brink has created life-saving capabilities in a drone that can break windows, fly into houses and confined spaces, and even crash into things and stay in the air with advanced pilot assistance that does not use GPS. Brink drones are built in the USA. It has night vision and IR that can function in blacked out and zero light conditions. It can flip itself back over, and it is a flying cell phone with two-way communication and a live video feed. It can even carry and drop off items for hostage negotiators with the payload feature. Brink has a really cool and compelling heritage that came to be after the 1 October mass shooting at Mandalay Bay in Las Vegas, and they are committed in their mission to leverage technology to save lives. And I can tell you firsthand that their drones will do just that by flying into places that are too dangerous to risk human lives. If you work in public safety, your agency needs to see what this drone can do. Go check out Brink Drones at brinkdrones.com, or feel free to reach out to us, and we'd be happy to tell you all about them. Again, that's Brink, BRINC, drones.com. Yeah, and those, like I said, those little things really add up to the happiness and the productivity of everybody, right? Like, if they're not having to deal with broken cars all the time, or they don't have to go to a different building or a different office to make a photocopy of something, everything gets better, right? And everyone's just happier. And it sounds silly, but those things will pay off. The other thing is, recognizing how impressionable those people are. And I mentioned earlier, talking in this group of older cops, and everyone wants to complain and have the same thing. And, when I gave my approach to it, I'm a junior guy to a lot of them, right? Not a guy that's brand new. I've been around for a while. I have some credibility based on just the specific work that I've done, but it's still influence, and it's still a way of leading, right? And so you hear everyone talks a good game about leading by example. And this is the sort of thing where it's not just about being the guy that can carry all the work. This is a good teamwork concept too. The guy on the team that wants to go carry all the weight and be the one who does the most of the work, just whether it's they're chasing stats or they're trying to make the most sales or clear the most calls or whatever that looks like. There's something to be said about that work ethic, but
Ambition, baby.
But there's also a lot to be said about just having a good attitude and to be willing to stand up to bad ideas and bad attitudes and just saying, hey, I disagree. Like, don't be afraid to be that guy. And a lot of people don't have the balls. I literally see people complain because it's the cool thing to do. And
sport pitching, it's fun.
Yeah. And yeah. I get it. Like, at times you can make humor out of it and you can decompress, but you can also look at things in a more, like Jim said earlier, frame it in a better way.
I'll give you another attitude thing while we're on this topic about how you greet people. The attitude thing, we just talked about sport bitching or whatever. Just consider when you see someone for the first time on your shift or in the day, how do you say hi to them in the hallway? Do you glare at them and drink your coffee? Do you do like the tough guy routine, or do you smile and say hi and look them in the eye and greet them by name or whatever your nickname is for them?
It's always the head nod,
boopy,
right?
Or things. Yeah, or just sup, right? And that's cool. And there are some cultures and organizational cultures that push that, but I'll tell you what, the people who go places typically act friendly toward other people. Like, it's a thing.
Yeah. And you almost have to be cartoonish about it. Like, you have to go out of your way to not fall into that trap. So we've talked about leading up and down a couple times, and leading by example is one part of that. Like, you're just trying to set the stage for what it should look like, what right looks like, what resourceful looks like, what positive force of change looks like. But leading up and down, what about that part? We've mentioned that a couple times. One is, when it comes to leading down, it's running top cover, right? It's looking out for the new guy and trying to prevent them from their own missteps. And this is something where, again, we talk about our bosses and our management and our leadership. What things can you take off of their plate and prevent from being problems that they don't have to deal with? That lets them deal with the bigger picture stuff. If the rookie is about to do something stupid and you get in the way and you pull them aside and say, hey, dude, how about we do it like this? This is the right way. I don't want to catch you doing that shit again. Now your boss it didn't become a problem that would require the boss to get involved. But two, you also kept that guy out of trouble and became someone that hopefully they will be able to trust and earn some respect from, because they'll look back on it and go, yeah, that was probably a good idea. I should know better. And I should also, not be on that guy's radar as a turd, right? Like, as a guy that's not good at his job. So that's the leading down stuff. And there's obviously a line you have to draw. Certain things are for the bosses to deal with. Certain things are where there's a moral or an ethical or even a legal threshold at which that's not for you to handle and just sweep under the rug. That's not what I'm talking about, right? What I'm talking about is those situations where you can steer the guy in the right direction before it's gone down that path. So you have to differentiate that a little bit, but that's a big part of leading downward. Now, we talk about leading upward. And I used the example earlier of guys who have outpaced me in their promotions and advanced their careers in ways that, we're still friends and I can still have a conversation with them and be candid, which goes a long way, right? But it's also those situations where, if your boss has an open door policy, you go and have a conversation with them about things. And this is a delicate area, because a lot of quote unquote leaders or management types will say that they have an open door policy, and it doesn't work out that way in practice. Now, one of the big problems and I would argue one of the big reasons for that is because the open door policy is not intended to circumvent chain of command, right?
Yeah.
Or whatever your procedure is supposed to be.
Yeah. There's a lot of layers here, right? So, all bosses want to know what's going on. They also tend to feel like they're not being told what's going on. And so they have to fight for feedback typically, and they're going to say, tell me what's going on. You in this kind of middle manager position really have to think about what do I need to put on the boss's radar and what don't I need to put on the boss's radar? And one of the venues that we use in most military flying squadrons is like a weekly staff meeting. We do like a weekly huddle. Every office in the squadron builds a PowerPoint slide about, hey, here's our status. Here's what's on our radar. Here's what we need from you. And I got a couple things on that. One, I hate meetings. I hate sitting through an hour-long meeting where I hear every office say the same thing that they say every week. That drives me crazy. And my position is, if I'm bringing it up in a public forum, I have already messed up. Like, I should have a close enough relationship with my boss that if I need his help with something, I can talk to him. I can send him an email. And you also need to know what basic communication, what things do I talk about and what things do I email about? Do I need a paper trail? Do I need to package up a solution for him to forward to his boss? Right. And we have one of my favorite tactics is what I call a RTS, a ready to send email. So I will draft an email for him to click send on with his signature block on it. I'll say, boss, this is what I would say if I were you. And I would try to build his credibility. So I'll make the case and make it really, really good as far as the evidence supporting whatever it is we're trying to do or the money we're trying to get, whatever. But that's one of the ways I can lead my boss. I can literally say, I need you to say these words, right? And also consider what I don't need to tell the boss. I don't need to bitch to the boss about the copier if it's something I can fix myself. And I need to understand the difference between what's urgent and what's important. Boss, this week, this is the thing I need from you. I need you to get this rule changed so that we can move your ball forward. I need you to get this guy hired or this guy fired so that we can start moving the ball forward, right? So you need to pick your battles and understand what needs to be on their radar and what doesn't, and understand often big bosses have many things they're trying to manage. And so if you can scope that down for them just a little bit and keep them focused on one message, you can help them a lot, and you can build credibility with them a lot.
I really like the ready to send email idea. And where this has come up for me is if there is a form that has to get filled out. Sometimes it's a form that's got to come from certain level, right? And it's not mine. But you could be the guy that writes the justification that goes in the little blurb.
Yes.
And you could talk to them about, hey, what are the things that are likely to, hey, I was going to write this up, but what are the things, what are going to be their hangups, or what are the obstacles or obstructions to this that we need to work past, right?
Yeah. And another thing on that is no boss on earth likes to be surprised, ever, right? And so if I know my boss is going to get asked about something in a meeting that he's in, I make sure he hears it from me first. Bad news never gets better with time, and surprises, like no boss ever wants to be caught flat-footed in front of his boss, right? So I'll shoot a text, I'll shoot a message. Oftentimes my bosses are on VTCs and they've got their computers up so they can read messages on Communicator or whatever. I make sure they are never surprised. And that goes along with sending a form to him. I'm never going to just pop a form into his inbox. I'm going to explain it with an email. I'm going to throw a sticky note on it. Hey boss, this is what I'm trying to get done. If I can get your signature on that, I can get your program moved forward. That sort of thing.
Yeah, I want to jump back to open door policies a little bit and just talk about the difference between circumventing chain of command. Like, my boss, my direct supervisor is not giving me the answer I want, so I'm going to go to the next level, versus having trust and credibility and dialogue with upper management people.
Yeah.
Right? There's a big difference between passing someone in the hallway and asking questions about things and talking about things in a way that can be constructive or looking for solutions. And kind of like Jim is saying about not surprising your boss, your messaging should be consistent. And this is a big part of just being a decent human. It's like talking smack behind people's back. You know, if you always say the same thing and you're always open and honest, then no one's going to be surprised by whatever they hear from another person. And you don't have to keep stories straight, right? Like if you tell people how you really feel, if it's something that you're willing to share to somebody else, you should just be consistent about that. And then you don't have to worry about the whole, someone's going to get mad because I said X, Y, and Z thing. And so when you have a conversation with a upper management person and they've got a quote unquote open door policy, you got to ask yourself, is this going to be anything that my boss would be surprised by, like he's never heard before? And two, why am I going to them instead of doing this through some other official channel?
That's huge.
And sometimes there are good reasons for taking advantage of an open door policy. Some might be that you're having a problem with an intermediate person and you need to address that. That is difficult, right? That's a loaded gun, you know? But where something like that would apply would be if there's some consistent problem around all of your troops, right? Like you're in a squad or a team of guys and everyone's having this problem with the supervisor and you're the one who is going to go deal with that. What I would suggest before you go to that, going above his head to his boss, is maybe talk with one of his peers and someone, like I said, lateral, kind of outside of your direct interaction with them, but say, hey, I want to talk to you about something because we're having this problem with our boss, and I don't want to make a big deal about it, but I'm just wondering how you think we should handle this. And in a lot of cases, that peer leader person, right, the someone that is just left or right of your boss, might say, you know what, I'll talk to him and we won't make it a big deal, but I'll go chat with them and we'll try to sort something out. Now, where you become effective at that is, again, in your messaging and your consistency, so that when your boss confronts you about it, this is, I told you about this and I was trying to get through to you, but you just weren't really having it. So I went to so-and-so to ask for some advice and he offered to chat with you. If you want to talk more about it, I'm happy to, but this is the problem that me and the guys are having. Right? You have to own it at some point and have those difficult conversations. That's not something that happens all the time, but it is something that could occur. And I want to give you an alternative to just going the guy's boss, right?
And as a basic business practice, to the extent you can handle things at the lowest level, you should try to handle things at the lowest level.
Of course.
Before I ever go to my big boss, one of the very first things I should be able to answer is, did you try to fix this yourself? Yes. Did you try to fix it with your immediate boss? Yes.
Yes.
That's why I'm standing on your desk, because I need your help with this. And don't just give them the problem. I need your help, and this is what I need you to do about it. Or give them some options. Every boss likes options. Boss, you could do this, or you could do this. I think you ought to do option B, right?
Now, one area where I do think an open door policy could be worth taking advantage of in terms of leading up is if you have an idea or whether it's a piece of equipment purchase or a training thing, whatever it might be, some idea that you think is going to have an impact outside of just your immediate group. Now, again, your boss should still be in the loop on this. This is a conversation that you should have had with them. But where I'm going with this is something that like maybe the entire department could take advantage of. And you want to get their ideas on whether they've considered that or they thought it was feasible, or if something was blocking it or preventing it, what that was, and if there's a way you can help be part of the solution. And the way, again, going back to Jim's comment earlier about framing that is, hey, chief or lieutenant or captain or whoever, what I'm trying to do is, I know you guys are busy, you guys have a lot going on and plenty of other things to deal with than having the good idea fairy do all this. What I was hoping I can do is I had this one idea. I wanted to run it by you. And if it was worth exploring more, and there's some of the groundwork, the busy work that I can help accomplish to take it off your guys' plate, but maybe help it get off the ground, I'd love to participate or be involved in that, right? Or maybe something is already happening that you want to be a part of. And you go and you ask them, hey, you guys are doing this new Train the Trainer program. This X, Y, and Z program is going to get off the ground soon. I just wanted to throw myself out there as a volunteer. If you're looking for help with something like that, I'd love to get involved. And again, I let Sergeant so-and-so, I let my immediate boss know about it, but I just wanted to throw my name in the hat to be part of the solution if you guys are looking for people. Right? Those are areas where I'd say your open door policy type of thing might be useful. But what you gain by that on some level is trust and credibility with those bosses. And those, going back to resourcefulness, are always going to be good friends to have, right? So building on the idea of leading up and also down and also lateral, left and right, there's also that internal and external stuff. And for example, I'll use the auto shop, right? The guys that fix our cars are not really, they're not cops. They're not part of the agency so much. They're not indoctrinated into our culture, our organization, the way that, like, they've got their own, right? And so there's an internal and an external interaction that happens there. This is important to wrap your head around because different organizations will handle things differently, right? This is like Jim was saying, wrap your head around their process, figure out, like, dissect their process and understand how things work in their world. a big part of that, self-awareness wise, is understanding how things work in your world. What things occur in an email? What things occur in those conversations? Whose ear do you really have to accomplish certain things? And something that I've seen a lot, just as an example of this, is let's say that you wanted to accomplish, well, I'll use my example earlier of training, right? The chief of police does not have his hand in the day-to-day of training stuff. And so you might go have a great idea for training, and you find yourself chatting about it over coffee with the chief one day, and he's like, yeah, that sounds awesome. Well, that doesn't mean your idea is going to happen, right? You need to go talk to the low-level guy out at the academy that handles training. And when you understand, like, oh, these are the guys who, this is the person I need to talk to, this is how problems get solved, that goes a long way. The other part of understanding those forces is, earlier I talked about having problems with the boss and how you would deal with a new guy that's about to do something stupid that you're going to get a hold of and say, hey man, like, that's not how we do things around here. I'm going to fix you, right? How you approach those conversations goes a long way, and it's heavily affected by the culture of your organization. So if I can go to my boss and say, hey, Sarge, right? Like the sergeants in law enforcement are called Sarge because the extra syllables just too much.
Sergeants in the military love that, by the way. They love being called Sarge.
Yeah. Hey, Sarge, can we go meet like mid shift? Like, hey, can I bug you about something? Can we go? We call it, we have a code for it, right? Because cops have codes for everything.
Code 10,000.
And it's where like the two cops go and they park driver window to driver window so we could watch each other's back, but we're also close to be able to talk, right? Nice. And so when we're meeting up like that, we can have a conversation that is different than having a conversation in the briefing room, right? That's where those one-on-one conversations happen, where I might be typing on my computer, he's typing on his computer, and we could just start kind of bullshitting about something. And then like suddenly we turn our heads and now we're engaged with what each other has to say. So we meet up mid shift and we have those like down to earth conversations across the driver's windows of our cars. Right. And so in my world, in law enforcement, and I imagine this is true for lots of agencies, but certainly in my agency, a lot can happen in terms of building that relationship with your boss by having those parking lot meetups. And it's not just your boss, it's also other cops. It might be the new guy. Hey man, can you come meet me over here in the Walmart parking lot? Can we, like, hey, I just want to talk to you about something real quick, and not a big deal, but blah, 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 blah. Just want to run it past you. And then suddenly you guys are having this long 45-minute conversation about it potentially while you guys are working on paperwork, right?
Yeah. So there are a lot of layers there. Yeah. One is just mentoring and what formal mentoring is and informal mentoring. Mike and I grew up in a cadet program back in the day, and we'd spend 2.5 hours marching around and shining our shoes and stuff. And then we would all go to Carl's Jr., and we would get burgers and talk with each other and talk to the adult supervisors about how things were going. And like half of the meeting was what happened at Carl's Jr. afterward. Right. Along these lines, bosses love talking about culture. I see it all over the place. It's kind of a term du jour in the military and specifically in the Air Force right now. But you got to understand what culture really means in an organization. Think about things like what rules matter and what rules don't. There are lines you can cross and lines you really must never cross, right? What are the unspoken rules? Lines that you don't even know are there because no one wrote them down. So I fly in the Air Force, but I did pilot training actually with the Navy. And I can tell you there's a huge difference in terms of how the Air Force views rules and how the Navy views rules. The example we use is like, I can do it unless a rule tells me not to in the Navy. Whereas in the Air Force, I cannot do it unless a rule tells me I can do it. That's a pretty big different way of thinking, like a whole different framework for approaching problems, right? And that relates into risk management. And this is one that you influence at your like mid-level. There are some organizations that just default to conservative no matter what. We're not going to do it unless we know we can do it. Unless the big boss approved it, we're not doing it. And then there's some organizations that default to go, go, go. Yeah, the weather sucks, the airplane's broken, but you know what? We got a mission, we're going to go. Now, there's trade-offs in both ways. Is one correct and one not correct? It depends. It depends on what your mission is. It depends on the proficiency of the people in the organization. It depends on a lot of things, right? And you got to thoughtfully think through what culture you want in your organization. Another big one is, how do you treat the new guys? How do you treat new ideas? How do you treat fuck-ups? That's culture. And yeah, it's great for the commander to get up or the chief to get up and be like, this is how I want more organization run. This is the culture that I want us all to have. That's wonderful that he has ideas or she has ideas. That's great. But you know where that's really controlled at? That's the sergeant in the police car, beak to beak with the other guy in the police car, right? That's around the water cooler. You own the culture. And you can make it a healthy culture, or you can make it a really damn unhealthy culture.
And there's a lot of, like Jim said, there's a lot of layers to it. Accountability is a big one. Personal responsibility is a big one. How you accomplish things, like, hey, X, Y, and Z is broken. Well, why don't you fix it then?
Thank you for volunteering.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of little things like that you can build into the culture of your organization. And the thing is, as we kind of wrap this whole thing up, if I'm talking to you, you're in that sweet spot where people are starting to look at you and you have a say, right? And if you are a more formal leader or a more tenured or experienced person who has those guys in their group, right, that you're trying to influence, just remember, you got to kind of sell it to them. And you have to kind of persuade them to take ownership. It's not going to just happen. You can't treat them like the new guy anymore. It just doesn't work that way. And a big concept in that, wrapped up in those ideas that I was just sort of talking about, is customer service. And
oh yeah.
And I'm not saying this in a sense of like, well, we want to provide like excellent service to our internal and external customers. Sure, that's fine. That's great. But more importantly, the takeaway from customer service standpoint that I want you to think of is, it's not about them. It's about you. So back in the day, I ran this pizza place, and we would have customer complaints. And our philosophy was like, hey, just make it right, make them happy. And so you'd have people call you and have these absurd, just like, well, I said I wanted this and that. And some people would be like, well, no, actually what you said was this, sir. And actually what you said was that. And that's not what you said, or that's not what we do. Or it's like, okay, well, how can I make this right? What can we do to make this happy? Do you want to come back for another pizza sometime? Would you like me to make you a new one right now? Right? Because it's not about what they did wrong or what they, where their shortcomings were. It's about you and how you approach solving those problems. And so the same thing happens here in a leadership sense. Is it's not about, all the mistakes or missteps of your commanders or the organization or the other people that you don't have any control over. It's about what ownership and possession you are going to take over your sphere of influence. What say do you have about your own attitude, your own productivity, your own work ethic, and all of those things, right? Don't make it about them. Make it about you. Be that force of change. Be that person who, when you talk, people listen. And if you're calling something out, you're probably right. Be that guy, right? Make it about you and who you are. And my final thought on this is, it is never too early and it's never too late to embrace this change, this turning point in your head. If you're a guy or a gal who is still pretty new, pay attention to this stuff and make sure that as you move forward that you are framing things with the right attitude in mind, right? So that you don't become that cancerous, negative, toxic person. And if you're the old salty guy who, thinks the ship has sailed because people already don't like you and you're, kind of have a reputation that's established or fixed, it's never too late to say, you know what, man, that's the old me. Like I'm too old to have that kind of attitude, and I just need to be happy and try to look forward to the things that I enjoy about this job and make a change. It's never too early and it's never too late to raise that baseline and to be a positive influence, a positive force of change. So I think that's all I got, Jim.
I like that. I love the saying that credibility is the currency of leadership. And you work your entire career to make sure that when you talk, people listen to you, that your boss listens to you, that your peers listen to you, that your underlings listen to you. And you can burn that currency really quickly if you're not careful with your words, if you don't support your claims, if you can't put your money where your mouth is on performance. And that's huge. It doesn't matter how long you've been in or what your rank is. If you're bad at your core job, no one's going to listen to you. Just is what it is, right? That's true in law enforcement. It's true in military. So I think that's a big thing. I think taking ownership is a big thing. And I'm not saying you can't complain. Just to be clear, that's like a sport. It's a hobby in the military. If the troops stop complaining, there's probably something really wrong, right? So I'm not saying don't complain. I'm saying that like there's a way you can approach that helps instead of hurts. That you can make it more healthy or more toxic depending on how you word things. And just framing it with, yeah, this is fucked up and here's what I want to do about it. And then around the water cooler, you build some consensus about what to do about it. And now you got a movement. Now you have a revolution, right?
Guerrilla
I spent
movement.
my entire career studying guerrilla warfare. Like this is it. Organizational guerrilla warfare is building that consensus and making things better. So go out there and do it. Hooray.
Yeah, get some.
Yeah. Good luck. Be safe out there.
This episode is brought to you by Ride-On Optics. Ride-On is bringing you high-quality glass at a great value. I use and trust their scopes, binoculars, and red dot sights, and you can too with their unconditional lifetime warranty. If you ever have a problem with their gear, they will replace it, not repair it. Finish up your next build and keep a little extra cash on hand for ammo so you can actually go out and shoot that thing. Find your next optic at rideonoptics.com.
This episode is also brought to you by Dry Fire Mag. Ammo is hard to find these days, and you need to stay proficient by working your dry fire training. Dry Fire Mag solves the common and annoying problem in dry fire of constantly having to rack your slide to reset the trigger. With Dry Fire Mag, all you do is clear your weapon, load this training mag up, and work on your trigger work. Check them out on dryfiremag.com.
Don't forget that we put out new episodes on the 1st and the 15th of every month. If you like what we're doing, you can head over to Patreon, give us $1 for each new episode. That money's going to go back into bringing you good content. If you want to interact with us, you could find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We are at TacTangents. You can also email info@tacticaltangents.com. And one last thing, our Facebook discussion group. We've got a little group going on Facebook. If you go to the groups tab on our page, you can join it. We've got more followers on our page than we have in the group. So I know there's some of you out there following the Facebook page that are on Facebook that are not in the group. Lots of like-minded people in there. So come hang out with us. All right. That's all we got. Good talk.